He is a bilingual author, therapist, storyteller, speaker, and gifted musician. His audiences have called him a passionate healer, a gentle giant, and an insightful, wise teacher. He is an inspiring leader in the Dufferin County area. His name is Kelly Walker. Kelly is one of Canada's experts on the questions of transition, change, and burnout. His books have been touted as giving a lifetime of wisdom to whomever should read them. This singer-songwriter delivers an enchanting listening experience. Join me, Diana Bumbaca, as I talk one-on-one with Kelly Walker right after this break. Welcome to One-on-One. I'm Diana Bumbaca. Joining me today is Kelly Walker. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Now let's start off with your participation in the Dufferin County's 125th anniversary. What was that experience like?
Well, it was a good experience. First of all, I was invited to perform with my friends, and so I had my regular friends. I do a lot of work with Mark Dubois, who's one of the leading lyric tenors in the country, Susan Cooper, who's from Orangeville. We all live up here. Susan's one of the finest mezzo-sopranos in the country. Jean Edwards, who is going to be 80 this year, who's one of the founding members of the Canadian Opera Company, and is stunning at 79. And then Deanie Petty was the host, so we had lots of fun. And I have to say that the audience was spectacular. It was in the fairgrounds, so it was a bit of a stretch, but it was lots of fun, and we enjoyed it, and the people enjoyed it, and it was good to celebrate the heritage of this county, because it's a county that was pretty well pulled together by immigrants and who came from Ireland for the most part, and then the British Isles, but has just changed radically over the years, in that it's gone from being a rural county to a rural county that holds a lot of urbanites and a lot of artists.
You are bilingual. What importance do you think bilingualism plays in Canada today?
Est-ce que vous voulez que je vous réponde en français ou en anglais?
Anglais.
I think it's radically important. I think what it does is it sets as a template for us stretching. And I think anybody who limits themselves to one language has really limited their imagination. Mm-hmm. And so I think having the two, we probably should have Cree in there too, or a few different things. But I think having the template of multilingual living, I think it's really important in that it gives us an invitation to not be small, mm-hmm. but to be huge. Also, I think it allows us in the country to be to maintain our links with Europe and the greater world. Otherwise, I think being unilingual can make us provincial, and I grew up speaking mainly English, but I went to Laval University after grade 13 and began. I wanted to be Canadian, so I began early to work on being bilingual. I now am also more than bilingual. I speak Italian almost as well.
That's fantastic. We should encourage more people to speak just as many languages as you, if not more.
I watch Chinese television. I don't understand Chinese, but I turn on the Chinese stations because I don't know them and I want to get to know them. And I have stereotypes about Asians until I see them in action, and I find out that they're very much like humans are humans.
That's right. Now you wear many hats. How did you get involved in so many different professions, and can you tell us what they all are?
Well, I guess I'm 65. So at this stage of my life, having crossed many bridges and I guess been on many arcs, I've learned. As a young man, I entered an order of preaching friars called the Dominicans, and in Quebec. And I guess through being part of the order of preachers, I learned to speak. And so a major part of my life is, I would say, transformational speaking. So I speak about change, burnout because I suffered one, grief, the role of the elder, or icons of hope, as I call it, futures subjects, how to grow well into the new paradigm, because we're living through a civilization shift, and I grew up in the old civilization, and we're on the verge of something entirely new, and so so there's that aspect. The other aspect of my life that's major is music, and at this stage of my life, most of my musical performing life is to benefit people. So I throw benefit concerts and bring my musician friends together to put on shows. We don't make any money for ourselves, but we make lots of money for other people. And then I have other aspects of my life too. But those are the two major things, except being an author. I write.
Of course. Well, when we come back, we will get to your books as well, but we're going to talk first about your charity work.
Thank you.
Please stay with us. There's more to come on One-on-One with Kelly Walker. Welcome back to One-on-One. Joining me today is Kelly Walker. Now, Kelly, just before we went to break, I alluded to some of your charity work. You've been involved in quite a bit. Can you tell me about some of your bigger performances?
I guess a couple things in the last years have caught my imagination. Artists don't always have a whole lot of money, but we've got all kinds of talent and we've got lots of friends. And so one of the things I've been able to do is pull together friends for benefits. I guess my biggest benefit has been Loft Community Services, which used to be called Anglican Houses. They have 56 or so houses in the GTA that look after frail elderly, street kids, SOS, hospice for people with AIDS, and also people who are cross-addicted, and young girls who are having babies, and there are a number of things, looking after street men. Anyway, it's been a great thing, and at St. James Cathedral every year, Billy Newton-Davis and I are the music directors for it, and we pull together a great show on the first Monday of every December, and I think we made $95,000 last year, and we do a really good bang-up job. Also, I've done a couple years ago, I did 2 concerts, I guess, at the Living Arts Center for Hospice of Peel. Hospice also holds a very special place in my heart. Another group is Rainbows, which is a program for kids coming out of grief and kids coming out of divorced families. And Rainbows is a really good program. And so we've done concerts for those. And Eric, or not, not Eric, but Eric Nagler works with us a lot too. And then Mark Dubois, Susan, and I did a show just a while ago for our sister's place for distress center for women in Alliston. Keeps us busy, and we love it.
And it's great to see you involved in the community.
Yeah, it's nice to be involved in the community.
Audiences call you a passionate healer, a gentle giant, and a wise and insightful teacher. How does it feel to have those titles?
Kind of humbling. But you are who you are, and people interpret you as they interpret you. And I'd love to be known as those things because I have a deep dream, I think, that I've had since I was a young man to help people live with the freedom of their own being. Mm-hmm. You know, so much of our life we pretend we're somebody else, and I spent a lot of my life pretending I was somebody probably I wanted to be, and the true me couldn't emerge till, often the true self can't emerge until midlife. And so I had a great breakdown at 40, and that was the beginning of a series of great breakdowns that helped me kind of live with my own truth and enjoy my being. And so that's my dream for other people, to help them do that. And you go through lots of dips and dives in getting to that point, but it's kind of wonderful when you get to a certain age and you realize the journey's been hard and long, but boy, it's been good, and there's a lot you can learn, and there's a lot that you can pass on to the next generation.
Mm-hmm. How is it that you help people through change and transition and breakdowns or burnouts?
Well, I guess in a couple ways. I first of all had one. That's the best school for anything, to fall apart yourself. And I had a great psychotherapist from Mississauga, Hildegard Schmidt-Mallow, who's dead now, who was also an artist and a stunning, stunning woman and a liberator. And she helped me with my own personal burnout in the early 80s. I was falling apart, had given myself away, and somehow in the process of helping everybody else, I fell apart to the point where I screamed out one day, I can't stand all this adulation or being everybody's sweetheart without any intimacy, which translated meant somehow in the process of helping everybody, I died myself. I gave myself away. And so I had to learn to recover myself, and it's been a long and exciting journey to live that.
Well, when we come back from break, we'll talk a little bit more about that and how you are helping other people.
Thank you.
Please stay with us. There's more with Kelly Walker right after this. Welcome back to One-on-One. I am here today with Kelly Walker. Now, Kelly, just before the break, we were talking about some of the experiences you had personally. For 12 years, you worked as a therapist. Did your own personal experiences help you with that work?
Yeah, I think I was talking to a psychologist friend of mine last night, and he was talking about visiting a patient of his who was suicidal in a hospital, and struggle he had with the psychiatrist, and then when he asked after the fellow had been released from hospital, what helped you most in the process, he said, well, one time when I was in your office, I cried and you held me, and another time you came to visit me at the hospital. They were the most important things. Well, I think that a therapist's you've got all the language and the learning and all of that, but I think the main ingredient for a good therapeutic process is to be able to know your own stories and be able to use that as the basis for where you go, and also to really listen well to other people's stories and realize that in the process of healing and falling apart and healing and falling apart, everybody's story is pretty similar. Mm-hmm. So I did that for 12 years until I was going through a marriage breakdown in my own life, and at that point when people would come to me and tell me how awful things were, I wanted to say, oh, just shut up and go home. Why don't you? You don't know what pain is. And so at one point then I decided I didn't really want to do that anymore. I had done it in that capacity as long as I wanted to and really could. Mm-hmm. And so I began writing, and it was through the writing that I began to address a much greater audience than I had in a one-on-one thing. And it was probably much more in keeping with the preaching tradition that I was raised in as a Dominican, where I would address huge audiences. And so the books, I've written 3 books, one on burnout called Loss of Soul, one on transitions called Dancing on the Ark, Facing Change in Uncertain Times. You know, Noah's boss decided he was going to downsize, and so he had to manage that. And so I talk in that book about the life, how to manage the life's transitions. And then the latest book I've done is called Growing Somewhere, Living Life After Midlife. And of course it has a huge audience. And people pick those up in major bookstores, or they get them on my own website, www.kwalker.com. That's a little plug. My first 2 books are Canadian bestsellers, so that's been a good way. And then out of that have come conferences all across Canada, the United States, the UK, and in lots of places. So that's been really challenging and a wonderful thing.
I wanted to ask how your philosophical and theological background helped you in both your writing and speaking.
I think I was raised as a Dominican and as a Roman Catholic, and both of them in their essence are huge. Now they get melted down historically sometimes, but the undergirding messages of both Jesus of Nazareth and then the understanding that's come through history is pretty open and huge, and has a wonderful place for the broken down and the marginalized. Churches forget that, and institutions forget that, and want everybody to be clean and neat, whereas humans are messy. And I think what it's given me is what the background has given me is, I think, a huge sense of compassion and a huge sense of forgiveness, a huge understanding of personal sin, but before that of personal blessing. I mean, human beings are quite wonderful, and we do fall apart. It's what happens to us, but we aren't just alcoholics, or we aren't just anything. Our lives are valuable, and we can always become pretty splendid.
And when we come back from break, we're going to talk about who some of your mentors are and what you think the place of an inspiration or a mentor is in an individual's life.
Thank you.
Please stay with us. There's more to come on One with Kelly Walker. Welcome back to One. Joining me is Kelly Walker. Kelly, who have been some of your mentors?
I think I've had several. One is an old aunt who has never been afraid. And so she's just always been a symbol of somebody who wants to grow. She'll be 88 this week. And I also had a very fabulous mentor and a man by the name of Jerry Judd, who was the head of a U.S. church called the United Church of Christ. And he left it and began studying psychotherapy with a disciple of Freud, and then began a movement called Shalom Mountain, where he had a kind of a therapy farm in outside of New York City. And I started going to him to help me with some of my transitions, and he's in his 80s now, and he's splendid. He's young, he's thrilling, and he's never looked back. Tom Harper is a dear friend of mine, and also has always been a support in each one of my transitions, and remains, he's in his 70s now, and he's open and exciting as a human being. I guess the other person was a therapist of mine, Ken Allen, and Ken also was somebody who allowed me to grow and was a good therapist. Hildegard, who's dead, Schmidt-Mallow, was a fabulous mentor. You know, when somebody breaks down, it's important for them to find somebody they think they can tell their story to without being shamed. You might be ashamed, but without being shamed. And I think the role of a good mentor is to listen, to have, Native elders, the tradition of native eldering with First Nations people is that the elder must have the right story for the right sickness. Mm-hmm. And so it is, I think, in good eldering, or in good therapy, I think it's that the elder needs to have an abundance of stories. Some of the stories that I'll use, even in my mentoring, might come from the scriptures. Mm-hmm. But they're first stories. They're stories that have the goods for, like the story of Noah and his transition in the ark, has all kinds of goods in to help people go through their transitions. One of my finest elders, who's been dead for a long time, was Pauline Vanier, the wife of Georges Vanier, the Governor General. Mm-hmm. She was an amazing person for me and helped me get language for some of the things I was going through in my life in my late 20s. I think it's a privilege to find a mentor.
What is the place of a mentor or somebody just who inspires you, especially when you're, I guess, younger?
Well, I think the place of the mentor is to give persons courage, and school teachers are often this, give people courage to live through the normal things that we go through. I mean, in our generation, we go through cancer, we go through divorce, we go through job loss, we go through religious crisis. Those are normal things that we go through. Mm-hmm. And most of the people who live in Toronto have gone through immigration and being homeless, mm-hmm. So all of those stories, I should say that some of the best mentors I've ever had have been my Sikh taxi drivers. These guys, so many of our taxi drivers are people who've come from another land. Toronto is full, the GTA is full of people who have mentor qualities because they left a dangerous situation, survived fleeing a land, or dared come to another land. Our grandparents would be great if they tell us their stories. How did they leave Poland? How did they leave anywhere to get where they are? And so mentors aren't special up there people, mm-hmm. but they're just great human beings who've dared live it.
Well, on that point, how have our families, schools, and religious institutions failed to prepare us for the ups and downs of life?
I think sometimes they do that by wanting everything to be nice. It isn't. And I think sometimes the religions have failed to see the depth of the wealth of their fundamental stories. Mm-hmm. That Jesus of Nazareth was a radical who was killed and still trusted in the divine through all of that, and held to principles and went somewhere. And our religious traditions have gotten too nice, and they've forgotten the guts and the drama of human life.
Kelly, I wanted to say thank you very much for joining us today. It was a pleasure to meet you.
It was great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. That wraps up another episode of One on One. Thank you for watching. We hope to see you again next time.